Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I haven't said this in a long time because we are doing a live stream today with the famous Ashley Preston. I say famous because he's been on so often, and everyone talks about Ashley and says amazing things about him. So it's good to have you on, Ashley. How are you?
Thank you very much, Darshan. You're too kind as always. It's great to be here.
And tell me a little bit about where you are, Ashley. We've been talking to you for years now,
Mm.
and we've sort of discovered and explored a lot of things. So where are you? Who do you work for? What do you do? And to be clear, as you'll see, everything we discussed today are personal opinions. They do not represent the opinions of past or present employers. So on to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Ashley Preston. I'm SVP of Regulatory Quality, Medical Writing and Operational Excellence at Syros Pharmaceuticals. And so we are a biotech company based in Cambridge, MA.
And what kind of biotech stuff are you guys involved in?
So we're in oncology, and we have a lead program that's in a pivotal study in MDS at the moment, in a biomarker-directed population, and we're eagerly awaiting phase 3 readout in mid Q4 this year, and as you can imagine, prepping for an NDA submission thereafter.
So you mentioned two things, Ashley, that I think are worth exploring a little bit more. You mentioned that you are in a biomarker-based product, if you will. First of all, for those people who don't know, what are biomarkers?
So biomarkers are biological components or markers, as the name suggests, that can be used to narrow down the patient population that may benefit from a particular drug or therapy. It's sort of the personalized medicine approach, if you like. So thinking about HER2, thinking about, in our case, the RARA overexpression. So we target patients who are positive for RARA overexpression, and so RARA mRNA overexpression. We target those patients in our clinical trial for therapy with tamibarotene, and we've shown that they are the most likely to benefit from that therapy. And that's what we're testing in MDS at the moment in our pivotal study, is the add-on of tamibarotene to the standard of care, which is azacitidine in MDS, and to see whether we can improve patient outcomes through the addition of TAMI to standard of care versus the azacitidine alone.
Okay, so I have to ask this question because I've never had this opportunity, but you're the perfect person to ask. You called it tamibarotene.
Yes.
Could you talk about naming a drug? How do you pick out the name of a drug? How do you register it? What does that even look like?
Oh, that's a tough one. I've been peripherally involved.
Okay.
I mean, Syros ourselves, we in-licensed tamibarotene from a company in Japan who originated the molecule. So it already had its name at that time. My prior experience naming a drug was many years ago, I'm talking like early 2000s now.
Okay.
And so there's a process by which you have to apply for an INN or a USAN or both. So the international non-proprietary name or the US non-proprietary name.
Let me ask you a question right there.
Yes.
Why do I have to ask for that? Can I go on without asking for it? Is that necessary?
I believe it is necessary. Yes, you have to have a non-proprietary name for your molecule, and you have some leeway into designing the name of the molecule, certain components of the name. Obviously, most names are quite long, and the clear example, the easy example is monoclonal antibodies always have mab at the end. Right. So avalimab,
that's rituximab or any of them.
Yes, rituximab. So you have a little bit of a leeway in designing maybe the leading edge of the name, and then it becomes an imab, or if we think about azacitidine, the cytidine, if you like, would be, and depending on for chemical drugs, it depends on also the structure. So certain structures require certain elements within the name. So we had the last one I worked on at the biotech in Australia I was working at. It was an analog of 3TC, the HIV drug, and so ours was aprocitidine. So we got to have some input into the apre, but the cytidine was based on the structure itself. So it was it's a conglomeration, and I believe you put in multiple options. And then they're considered against other molecules, and the review committee also has to consider trying to avoid confusion, trying to avoid confusion in terms of prescribing and understanding of therapeutic area in which you're operating. So you come up with some very interesting and honestly very hard to pronounce names at times for different molecules.
I may have misunderstood the question initially, so let me start from the beginning. All drugs, as far as I can tell, have at least 4 names. The first one is sort of the chemical name, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then, if there's the generic name, like the cytidines you were talking about, or anything like that. There's the brand name, that's number 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought there's a so aspirin would have a chemical name. Then there'd be N-acetylcysteine. Well, that's a different one, but acetylsalicylic acid. Acetylsalicylic acid.
Yes.
Then there would be aspirin, and then there'd be Bayer's whatever.
Yes.
The first chemical name, that's just chemistry. You'd have no control over that.
Correct.
The second one, which is acetylcysteine, is that still who decides that part?
Yes, so that really is the INN, or the international non-proprietary name. Okay. So in the same way, acetylcysteine, it was probably at that time would have been named almost purely around the structure. So there'd be an acetyl cysteine.
Right. Okay. Got it.
So as things have become more complicated, and I guess marketing has also wanted to have some input into the naming, you get more complex names. You also have the CAS number, which is the chemical number that is assigned as well. And the brand name, of course, the brand name also has to be approved for the same reasons. You don't want confusion in prescribing. That can be particularly important.
I mean, I know that, for example, OPDP has put out a guidance, and ISMP have both put out a guidance on how to name drugs using tall letters and combinations thereof. Obviously, as you pointed out, OPDP from the FDA does come out and say we consider, as you said, the other drugs that are out there, and that becomes a relevant issue. I'm just glad I asked that, because it's one of those things that happens in the background. No one ever consults the lawyer on this until it's too late. Oh, I should point out, then this stuff has to be trademarked.
Yes.
And I guess you can't trademark the INN. You cannot trademark the chemical name. You can only go after the brand name and trademark that.
I believe the brand name. The INN, I don't think you can necessarily trademark, because it's unique in any case. That's my understanding. But you're the lawyer, not me.
Yeah. So I'm saying you probably couldn't trademark the INN, because everyone's going to use it. I mean, that's the whole point, right? You can. It'd be ridiculous if you can go, look, I can protect Bayer's aspirin, but I can also protect aspirin, so no one else can ever use the term aspirin again while I'm using it. That'd be crazy.
That would be challenging. That would be very challenging. And then there's a few unique quirks. So acetaminophen, Tylenol, is known as acetaminophen in the US.
Yep.
And almost exclusively ex-US, it's paracetamol.
Correct.
But, there's a few nuances.
How does that work? Any idea?
I imagine perhaps it's reflective of the different perspective on naming between the USAN for the US use and the INN.
So that's when INN versus USAN becomes important, because USAN might have approved acetaminophen, and INN would have gone with paracetamol.
Correct. Yes. I believe, though, these days they try to harmonize, because that creates just more confusion in a global. We're more globalized these days. I think those examples, I believe, are less and less frequent, if at all.
So is it like USPNF, where at some point USP bought the United States formulary, bought the national formulary, and now they're just one organization, so it's easy enough to reconcile, versus INN, USAN? Are they owned by the same group at all?
I don't know, actually, to be honest.
I didn't know.
I expect possibly not, but I imagine perhaps these days companies are potentially more likely to first apply for an INN that can be used globally, and then follow with a USAN. But I'm no expert in that.
To be clear, I put Ashley on the spot. He had no idea he's walking into this conversation, but I appreciate it, because I've never had the ability to ask someone this question. And one of the games we play on this podcast is Ask Ashley Anything. And he goes, wait a
I'm
second.
ready. I'm ready for anything. The quality of the answer may vary, but I'm ready for anything.
Absolutely. So we started off with biomarkers. We talked a little bit about naming. And then we spoke a little bit about how you guys are, for example, targeting oncology.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know about your specific drug in this specific instance, or biologic in this specific instance. But my recollection with most drugs is there's a approved indication, and then there are unapproved options, if you will. I don't know if you know the history of your drug to the extent, I don't know when you came into the business, but to that end, do you happen to know why they chose oncology? And the reason I'm asking this question is I feel like about 10 years ago, I remember like early 10s, 2010, 2015 or so, everyone was doing oncology. Then there was everyone doing rare diseases. Is this sort of that byproduct of there's a bunch of money coming into oncology, we're all going to go down this path, and now we've got some great drugs coming out finally from that period? Or is it there was no way outside this being an oncology drug because this is a mAb and it only targets specific cells, and that's the direction we're going with? Talk to me a little bit about that process.
Right. So taking the Syros example, tamibarotene is a synthetic retinoid. It's a RARA agonist, RARA receptor agonist. It's been approved in Japan for many years for APL, which is a small subset of AML, of leukemia. And so Syros discovered through their laboratory work early on when Syros was first formed, they were looking at super enhancers in the genome. And they found a super enhancer for the RARA mRNA that in a certain subset of AML patients, you could observe a higher level of mRNA expression for RARA. And therefore, they hypothesized that this RARA agonist could be active in that population over and above the regular patients who are sort of have regular levels of mRNA for RARA. So the team at Syros, and this is before my time, went looking for the decision point had to be made whether we would create our own molecule, our own RARA agonist, or whether there was any available for in-licensing that could be suitable for this purpose. And they found tamibarotene and in-licensed it for that purpose, for RARA positive or RARA overexpressing AML and MDS in development. Now that doesn't mean that RARA isn't expressed normally in other tissues or other cells, but that was the area, and because it was already approved in that APL subset of leukemia, it made sense to take it in then to other heme malignancies. MDS is the focus at the moment. At a sort of whole industry level, I feel like the push to oncology in the 2010s, the earlier 2000s, there was also a drive, and around that time was the 2012 BTD came out, the BTD designation scheme, and there was a big push for oncology and to solve big problems in oncology. I feel like also because of the seriousness of the disease area, and there's also an element that's inescapable that the size of the studies and the development pathway can be appropriately expedited in oncology, where in other areas the study size is simply by virtue of the statistical analyses required, you need large studies. So thinking about diabetes and cardiovascular diseases, those are areas where you need large studies. So they inherently take longer to recruit and to develop molecules in those areas. So I think that you then have a mixture of companies. Larger companies with a large portfolio may sit in both therapeutic areas and develop in both at different speeds. And some of the smaller startups where they have one molecule, if there's an area you want to target and you want to have a serious unmet need, that's oncology very clearly, or rare diseases, and you can design studies, and by virtue of those therapeutic areas, those studies are typically smaller and hopefully faster to execute, not always, but hopefully faster to execute to get a new therapy to patients. That also has a knock-on effect, where if you show as an organization that you can develop new drugs and get them approved, you then attract revenue and funding to continue that model and to build your portfolio. So I think thinking from a venture capital perspective, if you like, or investment perspective, the faster your path to market on one molecule that then gives you changes the game for you as an organization, as a company. You're a proven entity and a commercial company that can then do that in multiple molecules. So that's I think one of the rationales perhaps why we see such targeted activity in oncology. I think now that we are also seeing that same passion, if you like, so start to broaden out to other areas. I mean, rare diseases has always been an area of high unmet need, and particularly important because of the gravity of a lot of those rare diseases and the small number of patients who really deserve new treatments. So that's been another area where also regulators have been willing to work more intensively, perhaps with sponsors, to get new medicines to develop the most efficient pathway to demonstrating safety and efficacy. Also, CNS is getting a big push these days. I think that's fantastic, because there are a lot of CNS diseases that still have no really great therapy or therapeutic options. So the more we can do about that, that is again challenging because of the nature of CNS disease. It's not quite as straightforward. The measures are not quite as straightforward as measuring the size of a tumor and so on. But it's still no less worthy to tackle those diseases. So it's great to see that. It's great to see the diversification in the industry. But we still have a lot of challenges in oncology to overcome. I mean, until cancer is cured in general, there's going to be work that needs to be done to across the board in this area.
So you raised so many things that I want to discuss a little bit more. The one thing I wanted to get into was this idea that I was not expecting the banner change to be that dramatic, so I apologize. Not seeing that come up so strong. So you mentioned this idea that there were smaller trials, and because they were smaller trials, it led to people going, look, we can get to market faster because we can do them faster, where there's just more, it's easier to fund something like that. From that perspective, do you think that the future is going to be targeted disease states? Not because the disease states need to be targeted, but because the money's better spent that way. And therefore, you get approval in targeted disease states, and then you back into the broader disease states because you've seen success. For example, what you guys are doing with Ceros, where you're seeing it in one specific instance, you're going, we might be able to upregulate and see it in more sort of a wider range, if you will. Does that logic make sense, or is this, I'm misinterpreting the data?
No, I think it is a complex picture, because I think that there are always unmet needs in any therapeutic area.
Yeah.
I think that one element to this is that the idea of personalized medicine, biomarkers, and even if we take it all the way down to individualized medicine, CAR T type of technology, the more you can refine the population and target the population, find a biomarker which indicates that that particular population with that biomarker are most likely to respond to the therapy, the more likely you are to have a successful study.
Right.
So in the sense that if you target everybody, you've got a certain percentage who may have that biomarker. If you didn't test for it, you took all comers, your result is almost averaged out, if you like. But if you can target that therapy, you're also not exposing folks to the therapy who may not have an opportunity to respond. It's just by virtue of their biology. So I think it makes perfect sense to find those targets and hone in your therapy on those targets. Now, what that means is you have to find, to service the other patients, you have to find a target that is relevant for them. But there will also always be certain molecules that have a broad range of activity and a wide range of.
But would they get the same funding in those situations? Because I'd have to sign up for much bigger investments, much bigger investments to do those clinical trials, just because it's just a wider audience I have to hit.
Right. The flip side to that is the wider, I guess, when you think of it from a business perspective, and let's face it, we're in here to bring new medicines to patients. The only way we can do that is to fund that research. So there has to be a cyclic relationship there. So to talk about the business aspect is with a view to funding more research. But the wider your indication, the more patients are available within that indication once you're approved to generate that revenue that you can funnel into future research. So rare diseases, and that's by virtue of the orphan designation, they were less popular to or less likely to attract research because the market size is very small in a rare disease. Yeah. So then that's where the regulators stepped in and offered concessions to companies who were willing to do that, recognizing that the offset of those concessions would incentivize companies to do that research. But if you think about cardiovascular disease, if you have a drug for cardiovascular disease, that's a huge market.
Yeah.
But it also takes a large study too. So the payoff is almost is sort of equivalent to the size of the market, if you like. And so the investment sort of runs in somewhat the same way, but we are also trying to be as efficient as possible to get those products to patients as soon as possible. And the only way to do that is to quickly and effectively generate that data that is going to prove safety and efficacy.
So I'm a movie buff, and as you can tell from, I actually can't. I like have a bunch of Marvel stuff around me, but so I'm a big movie buff, and I love movies. And in my head, I'm sort of comparing it to creating a little indie movie where your investment is low. Like I think the Blair Witch Project. You want to create you're putting in $15,000, $10 million. That's your budget, versus the next Avengers movie, which is $250 million.
Yep.
Is it easier to get funding for your $10 million Blair Witch Project, or $250 million to get your next Avengers movie? I'm wondering if you do the same comparison. What are you seeing in the market? Are you even in the market looking at that kind of stuff, or is that behind you so you don't have to worry about it right now?
I mean, it's somewhat beyond my role, but I'm also interested in it. So let's like I said, I'll answer any question. The quality of the answer may vary.
Fair enough.
I think that it's two components. One, the numerical value of your requested investment. The higher that is, the more challenging it would be, I think, to get that, simply by virtue of the availability of capital.
Yeah.
But what the investors will also look at is what is the potential upside once you're on the market. And so a broader indication in a larger population obviously has a higher upside. So the relative return is higher, but it will probably take longer. So all that complex algorithm goes into into the machine, into the black box of statistics, I guess, and they somehow crunch those numbers and sprinkle in a little bit of the probability of success given different benchmarks and precedents, and then they come up with a number or a relative assessment of whether they want to invest in your particular program or your company.
It's interesting to me. I think of Ceres and I think about the tremendous potential you guys have, and hopefully, and again, just to be clear, you do not hire me. You have never hired me, so I have no investment potential in this. Just to be clear, I have friends who have worked with you and friends like you who do work there. So I wish you guys the greatest success. But the point, sort of taking a step back, is the hottest thing right now, from what I can gather, is you could have obviously the Cirruses of the world, which I would consider more the Blair Witch projects of the equivalent, if you will. But everyone was talking about NASH, or now MASH, liver problems. And that was supposed to be a big thing. And I feel like the money there dried up a little bit. Like I'm not seeing as much talk about it as it was maybe 5 years ago. And I imagine some of it has to do with just so many products that failed. Madrigal sort of succeeded, but several failed along the way. But from what I gather, it is as big a problem as diabetes. And if anything, a lot of these drugs are helping may help with diabetes as well, if I remember correctly. But you have those sort of problematic disease states because you want the diseases, you want the successes there, but you're just not seeing them as easily. But then you have the GLP-1s, which are for weight loss, and they were really for diabetes. Most people barely remember that it works for diabetes. Everyone's using it for weight loss. So do you think certain disease states, just like lifestyle disease states, I think the last time I saw a rush like this was when Viagra came out. so certain disease state drugs just get funded easier because you can put your head around the problem, you can understand that problem a little bit more.
I think there's definitely an element, and I think that's where, if you think about the sprinkling into the mixture, into the algorithm for investment of the probability of success, and that is driven by, like you say, precedents. That what has failed before, and is it a failure of the particular molecule, or when you start to rack those up, you might think, well, that is a tough area to be successful in any way. MASH is why in oncology, pancreatic cancer is notoriously difficult. It's a graveyard for drug development, but it's also quite a worthy and an unmet need and a worthy pursuit. So somebody will get there at some point, but it takes a lot more effort to tease apart how to actually deliver a working therapy in that area. So I think that's part of that's algorithm of investment assessment. And that definitely will color the availability, I think, of capital for companies in that space. Now, that's not to say nobody will invest, and it's not to say that we can't be successful there, but it's a challenge. It's a hard road. The GLP-1s have been, they've got their story. Viagra's, got its story. I think those also are very. I mean, obviously the market size is huge, so it's it's an easy sort of easy bet, if you like, and particularly once you have multiple drugs approved, that area is going to be successful. So in attracting investment into those areas is easier. But I think it's also, I like to think that there's a certain sort of passion amongst the VCs in particular. I mean, VCs set up, you think of Flagship and other similar VCs, they're set up with a passion to deliver for patients as well. And they want to see all of their portfolio companies be successful. And so they, a unique idea and a good science coupled with work the algorithm. And if it looks like it has a chance at success, I think they will get behind it in one way or another. So I don't think we're going to see any stifling of that based on therapeutic area. It's just that we have to recognize that some things will take longer than others. Some problems will take longer than others to solve.
Now, one of the things you mentioned was this idea of therapeutic success. And success has, I think, there are multiple gates to success, for lack of a better term. One gate to success is approval. The second gate to success is commercial success, if you will, for lack of a better term. We saw weight loss. I don't think it was ever contemplated, or at least wasn't the primary indication for weight loss for the GLP-1s, but we backed into it because the success was there. In the context of other products, off-label uses are often land up being the standard of care for whatever disease state in question. I guess what I'm asking is, in the last 2 or 3 years, actually last 10 years, the FDA has had to reconcile itself to the new reality that off-label marketing may become more and more prevalent, and that there's a new reality they have to deal with. With the recent Chevron case, or technically Loper Bright case, the idea is that the FDA may get challenged sooner rather than later on off-label marketing. In that scenario, do you foresee a world where someone goes, you know what, we're going to get our product for this, our product approved for this indication. We're going to have the evidence for everything else. So we know we can get this approval. We might be able to get this approval. We're now consistent with the label, and we can now go out there into the market and market it. To be clear, you are not speaking for Ceros right now. I just want to make this very clear for everyone. But as an industry, do you think we are stepping into either the panacea, which is doctors, pharmacists, everyone else, sort of, as a pharmacist, I can say, like physicians, pharmacists, etc., get to advise on real data that's out there so that we can help patients? Or are we walking into a world where we're getting back into the snake oil salesman, where we get one product approved for one indication, now people are saying all these other things that are unproven, but no one's there to stop them? So does that question make sense? Am I phrasing that properly?
Yeah. It's that's always the tough questions, Darshan. It's yeah. I think that one. I mean, first and foremost, physicians have the right to prescribe
Off-label, yeah.
whatever for whatever whatever drug for whatever use they consider in their expertise to be of potential benefit for the patient. And companies have the right to market their drug for what they are approved for in the FDA label. They also have the right to develop additional indications and have them approved and market those.
Correct.
The space in between is interesting because it's a fact that some level of off-label prescribing happens by virtue of point one, where physicians have that prerogative. I don't know whether we're heading into a space where that is going to increase or decrease or otherwise.
We know it's going to increase. We know it has to, because the FDA said that this is how you do it. So
okay. Well, yeah. So the interesting thing that I have seen, and I believe the company name is Every Cure.
Yes.
Where they are looking to run studies that provide clinical evidence for old molecules in new indications. Yep. And that's a very fascinating kind of idea and model.
Yeah, I agree.
To think about, and also fascinates me as to how you would build a company around that, but still not run afoul of the FDA regulation. So that's an interesting one. That's a good question, but I probably don't have a great answer on that one, other than to say, we do what we can to develop as many drugs in as many indications as possible and market them in a compliant way.
Beautifully said. I think your compliance officer would love you for how well you answered that question, by the way. I do want to say, for those people who tune into my podcast, we did an interview with the former CEO of Civica RX. Have you ever heard of them?
The name sounds familiar, but I'm not. Yeah.
They are a non-profit pharmaceutical manufacturer.
Okay.
And they only worked with generic drugs. They had no desire to make a profit or anything. Their goal was to address the drug shortage problem. Mm-hmm. And the idea of, I love the new models coming out, since you mentioned Every Cure. For those people who don't know, Every Cure, it was, I can't pronounce his last name. I apologize to him. He's a really smart guy out of University of Pennsylvania, so he's around the corner. I've seen him speak. He had Castleman's disease. For those people who don't know the history, he had Castleman's disease. He's a doctor. He literally went, there's a drug out there that possibly might work to save my life. And he basically figured out how to make that happen, which reminds me, for those people who don't remember, there was a movie, Someone's Oil. Do you know which movie I'm talking about? Lorenzo's Oil, which was on a similar concept, except what Every Cure is doing is they're saying, let's not stop at one disease state. Let's do this for all disease states, or as many disease states as we can. There are approved drugs out there that are just sitting on the shelves, and we know that they work for one disease state. Let's see if they work for others. And I think that's awesome, and that's amazing. But I think that's a really interesting, kind of hope-filled way to end this conversation, because we've spoken about so many different things. We spoke a little bit about how to name drugs. We spoke a little bit about funding of disease states, if you will, and how money goes into it. We spoke a little bit about biomarkers and the importance of them and why that comes about. I did have more questions, but we'll just have to come back. Actually, this just means you have to come back again, unfortunately.
Why not? It's always a fun conversation, Darshan. Always a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on. Actually, for those people who want to reach you and go, you know what, I want to put a ton of money behind Syros because I love Ashley, how do they do that?
Certainly. You can find me on LinkedIn, Ashley Preston, easy to find, or you can contact me at syros.com.
Perfect. Thank you all.
Thank you.